Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we diving deep into one of the most complex and divisive conflicts of the 20th century, the Vietnam War. This wasn't just a battle fought in the jungles of Southeast Asia. It was a war that tore nations apart, reshaped global politics, and left scars that are still healing today. To truly understand its impact, we need to go back to the beginning, long before the first American combat troops arrived. Our story begins not in the 1960s, but decades earlier. For nearly a century, Vietnam was part of French Indochina, a colony of France. During World War II, Japan occupied the region, but after the war's end in 1945, a powerful Vietnamese nationalist movement, the Viet Minh, led by a charismatic figure named Ho Chi Minh, declared Vietnam's independence. Ho Chi Minh, who had once sought support from the United States, was a committed communist. France, however, was unwilling to let go of its colony, leading to the First Indochina War. For 8 long years, the French fought against the Viet Minh's guerrilla tactics. The conflict reached its climax in 1954 at the decisive Battle of Dien Bien Phu, where the Vietnamese forces achieved a stunning victory, forcing France to the negotiating table. The resulting Geneva Accords of 1954 were a pivotal moment. The agreement temporarily divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel. In the north, Ho Chi Minh established a communist state, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, with its capital in Hanoi. In the south, a non-communist state, the Republic of Vietnam, was established, led by Ngo Dinh Diem and backed by the United States, with its capital in Saigon. The accords called for a nationwide election in 1956 to reunify the country. However, fearing a likely victory for Ho Chi Minh, both the United States and the South Vietnamese government under Diem refused to hold the elections. This decision set the stage for the next phase of the conflict. The division that was meant to be temporary became a hard border, a flashpoint in the escalating Cold War. In the late 1950s, the battle for Vietnam began to intensify. In the South, Diem's government became increasingly authoritarian and unpopular, alienating large segments of the population, particularly the Buddhist majority. In response, communist sympathizers and nationalists in the South formed the National Liberation Front, better known as the Viet Cong. Supported by North Vietnam, the Viet Cong began a guerrilla campaign of insurgency and assassination against Diem's government. This is where the United States' involvement deepens, guided by the domino theory, the belief that if one Southeast Asian country fell to communism, others would follow. The U.S. began sending military advisors and substantial financial aid to prop up the South Vietnamese regime. Presidents Eisenhower and then Kennedy steadily increased the number of advisors, hoping to contain the spread of communism without committing to a full-scale war. The turning point came in August 1964 with the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The U.S. claimed that its naval destroyer, the USS Maddox, had been attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in international waters. While the details of the incident remain debated, it was the justification President Lyndon B. Johnson needed. Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting Johnson broad authority to use military force in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. By March 1965, the first American combat troops were landing at Da Nang. The advisory role was over. America was now at war. The strategy, known as search and destroy, involved sending U.S. troops into the jungle to find and eliminate Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army forces. This was paired with a massive bombing campaign against North Vietnam called Operation Rolling Thunder. Fighting in Vietnam was unlike any war American soldiers had ever experienced. There were no clear front lines. The enemy was often indistinguishable from the civilian population. They faced a landscape of dense jungles, rice paddies, and complex tunnel systems. Viet Cong tactics relied on guerrilla warfare, booby traps, ambushes, and lightning-fast raids. The psychological toll was immense. Soldiers battled not only a determined enemy, but also the constant heat, monsoons, and the mental strain of never knowing where the next attack would come from. For the Vietnamese people, the war was a daily catastrophe. Villages were caught in the crossfire, and the use of chemical defoliants like Agent Orange destroyed forests and farmland, causing devastating health problems for generations to come. The war created millions of refugees and resulted in the deaths of millions of Vietnamese civilians. Back in the United States, public opinion began to shift dramatically. Initially, many Americans supported the war, seeing it as a necessary stand against communism. But as the conflict dragged on with no clear end in sight, and as graphic images of the fighting were broadcast into living rooms every night, making it the first television war, and powerful anti-war movement emerged. Protests grew on college campuses and in major cities. The 1968 Tet Offensive was a major psychological blow. Although a military defeat for the North, the sheer scale of the coordinated attacks across South Vietnam shattered the official narrative that the U.S. was winning the war. It showed the American public that the enemy was far from defeated and support for the war plummeted. President Richard Nixon took office in 1969 with a promise to achieve peace with honor. His strategy was Vietnamization, a plan to gradually withdraw U.S. troops while building up the South Vietnamese army to fight on its own. Simultaneously, however, Nixon expanded the war, secretly bombing communist supply lines in neighboring Cambodia and Laos. This expansion, when it became public, sparked even more outrage and protests, including the tragic shootings at Kent State University in 1970. Finally, after years of painstaking negotiations in Paris, a peace agreement was signed in January 1973. The Paris Peace Accords called for a ceasefire and the complete withdrawal of U.S. troops. For America, the war was over. But for the Vietnamese, the fighting did not stop. Without the massive support of the U.S. military, the South Vietnamese army struggled to hold back the North. In the spring of 1975, North Vietnam launched a final, massive offensive. The South's defenses crumbled rapidly. On April 30th, 1975, North Vietnamese tanks rolled into Saigon, the southern capital. The world watched the dramatic images of helicopters evacuating the last Americans and desperate South Vietnamese from the roof of the U.S. Embassy. The war was finally over, and Vietnam was reunified under communist rule. The legacy of the Vietnam War is profound and far-reaching. The cost was staggering, nearly 60,000 American lives, and an estimated 2 to 3 million Vietnamese lives, both soldiers and civilians. Returning American veterans faced a nation deeply divided, and many struggled with physical wounds, psychological trauma like PTSD, and the effects of Agent Orange. Politically, the war eroded American public trust in the government and led to the War Powers Act, which limited the president's ability to commit troops without congressional approval. For Vietnam, the country faced decades of recovery from the devastation of war, international isolation, and economic hardship. Today, Vietnam is a vibrant, unified nation, and remarkably, the U.S. and Vietnam have become important partners. Yet, the memory of the war serves as a powerful and somber reminder of the complexities of international conflict and the immense human cost of war. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. It's a heavy topic, but an important one to understand. If you found this video informative, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more historical content. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next one.